Okay, so further to not wanting to get screwed or ripped off, the only way that that's going to happen is if you are cognitive or if you're aware of what the costs of things are. That's what we were talking about. If you go to a car dealership, you've done some comparative shopping first. Well, you want to be able to do that whether it's renovations or even if you're just buying supplies for your clinic. Now, for those of you that are physicians and chiropractors, you don't have an awful lot in the way of supplies. I mean, you've got an examination table, you've got the adjustment table, and you've got that disposable paper. But the dentists I'm talking to, and I'm a dentist, so in dentistry, we're running a mini hospital. We have to buy a whole bunch of supplies. So we want to know what the costs are. We want to learn how to count the costs. Well, how much should things cost? Well, the fact of the matter is, we don't have a flying flipping clue when we first get out of school. And then when we're working as an associate, nobody talks to us about these things. So when you do end up purchasing your own practice, suddenly you're paying for everything. And this is what happens when you're a business owner. And it doesn't matter whether you're in private practice or whether you've got a pizzeria. The fact of the matter is, when you own a business, you get paid last. Everybody else gets paid first, and you get paid whatever's left over. So if you produce this much in terms of dentistry or pizza, I don't care what it is, if your expenses are this much, then you only get the difference. What you want to do is you want to decrease your expenses. So there's a phrase for that, and the phrase is, and we're going to teach you some accounting now, the expense to gross ratio. The expense to gross ratio. So what the gross represents is the gross amount of your collections, not the gross amount of your production or the gross amount of treatment you've done. We're going to talk about that in a couple of minutes. Production means nothing. Collections is really what's important when it comes to the accounting side of things. So let's say, for argument's sake, that you've been doing, in this case, dentistry. Let's say you've been doing it for a few months. Let's say, for argument's sake, your billings are about $33,000 per month. Well, guess what? If your billings are $33,000 per month on a consistent basis, after 3 months, your billings are about $100,000. And if it's $100,000 after 3 months, and 3 months, here's another accounting phrase, is a fiscal quarter, and there's 4 fiscal 3-month periods, 4 fiscal quarters in a year. At the end of your year, if you've done $100,000 per quarter times 4, then what your gross productivity is, remember, we're not going to use productivity, but what your gross productivity is $400,000. Okay, let's say, for argument's sake, that, here's another phrase, your accounts receivable department. Accounts receivable are the ones that receive finances for you. So you should have people in your practice that are assigned to doing accounts receivable. And in another video, we're going to tell you that if you've got your front desk receptionist doing this, this is a bad idea. 1, because they're not trained. 2, because they're constantly going to be interrupted. And 3, because if you've got a good front desk person, they've got a bubbly, compassionate personality, and bubbly, compassionate people don't like collecting money. It's part of their personality. They want to be a people pleaser. So they're actually the last type of person you want to ensure that you're collecting money. You want somebody that's very analytical, numbers oriented, almost anal retentive if you want, but you want somebody that is very, very into numbers and very into quantitative things to be working on your accounts receivable. And really, that's what accountants are like. And I know that because I train accountants. Anyway, point of the matter is, if you've got $100,000 worth of productivity for every fiscal quarter, if you do that all year long, at the end of your fiscal year, you have $100,000. And now what you're going to do, at the end of your fiscal year, you've got $400,000. Dr. Kevin has to learn how to do accounting. You've got $400,000. Now what you're going to do to figure out what your expense to gross ratio is you're going to figure out how much am I spending, in this case, on supplies. So remember in the previous video, I was talking about this sales rep, and I got an invoice for $280 for something that should have cost $19.95. How did I know it was 1995? Because I'd learned to count the costs. I became aware. Before I was aware, I was ignorant. Ignorant means unaware. So I was completely ignorant as to what the cost of materials were, but I started to find out. So when I got dinged with this $280, I knew it was way out of whack. But I also knew that wax comes in 5-pound boxes. So when I challenged my sales representative as to why I got charged 1,400% higher than what this should have cost, and remember, when you're in sales, if you can sell something at a much higher profit margin, your commissions are way better. So when I challenged him, why did I pay $280? He tried to do something that when I was in sales, we would call baffle you with BS. And baffle you with BS works like this. If a customer or a client or a consumer or a patient asks you a question, you can either know the answer and tell them the truth, or if you don't know the answer or you don't want to give them the answer, you baffle them with BS. Have you got it? You either tell the truth or you baffle them with BS. Now, there's a middle ground. What if you honestly don't know the answer? Well, you can still try to baffle them with BS, but I don't suggest you do that. Instead, say, you know what? That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer to it, but I'll find out, and I will get back to you. Nobody's upset if somebody says, I don't know everything, especially with a doctor. If you admit that you don't know everything, your patients are going to love you. So someone asks you a question, you don't know the answer, say, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, or I don't know a comprehensive answer to that, but give me some time, I'll look into it, and I will get back to you. And then make sure that you get back to them. Because if you don't get back to them, really, they're going to think you baffled them with BS. You just sidestep the issue by promising to get back to them, and then you never do. That's a really good way to ruin your reputation in your community. It's a great way to lose patients from your patient pool. Anyway, so I asked Dale the question, how come this was $280? And he tried to make me believe that somehow in the shipping area, they took a 5-pound box and they multiplied the price 5 times because it was a 5-pound box. You see how this is supposed to make sense? Because it doesn't make sense. But that was the BS I was supposed to swallow. If the price for a 5-pound box was supposed to be 1/5 of $280, it should have been $56. So I just did the math in my head. 280 divided by 5, it's $56 a box. So when I said to Dale, hey Dale, you mean instead of $280, it was supposed to be $56? And they just charged me $56 times 5, and that's how it ended up being $280? Dale said, yes, doctor, exactly. In other words, he thought I bought his BS because I seemed to be satisfied with the idea it was $56. But this is what Dale does for a living. He sells supplies. He knows darn well it's not $56. So he didn't wow me with wisdom by telling me the truth, by going, well, gee, doctor, if they actually did take 1/5 of the price and multiply it 5 times, and that's how they got $280, well, gee, doctor, that doesn't make sense because I know supplies because I sell them. That would mean that a box of wax is $56, and I can tell you it's nowhere close to that. So no, that can't be why you got charged $280. I don't know what went wrong here. Let me find out. But he didn't do that. Instead, he tried to baffle me with BS. Except I wasn't unaware. I had counted the costs. So when you learn to count the costs, then you're already empowered because you have knowledge, and knowledge is power. So back to Dale, I already knew what the answer was. The answer was a 5-pound box should have been $19.95. When Dale tried to BS me with the idea that somehow they took $280, divided it by 5, and then multiplied it 5 times, $56 times 5 is $280, I'm going, that smells like BS. When I asked him the probing question, so really, Dale, so a box is typically $56? And I made my voice go up. And when you watch the videos on communication, when your voice goes up, it suggests that there's a question or you're not sure what you're talking about. So, of course, I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know anything about supplies. So I let my voice go up on purpose. So you mean, Dale, it was supposed to be $56? And he goes, yes, doctor, exactly. And then I knew it was BS. And like I said, that was the last time I bought anything from him. So what you want to know is you want to know how much should supplies cost? Well, if you have $400,000 a year in productivity, and if you find out that you are spending $32,000 a year on supplies, then you're going to do a very simple mathematical calculation. You're going to put $32,000 in the numerator position, right? Now we're talking division. We learned this in grade 4. And then we're going to divide that, 32,000, by the denominator, which is the total amount of productivity, in this case, 400,000. If you spent 32,000 out of 400,000, then the answer is 0.08. That's your expense to gross ratio. If you express 0.08 as a percentage, it's 8%. In other words, you're spending 8% of the income that you bring into your practice on supplies. And you might ask yourself, well, gee, is that good? Well, you won't know if it's good if you never do the mathematical calculations. And there's reports that suggest to you that anywhere between 7.5% to 8.5% is good. So if you calculated your expense to gross ratio just on supplies, and if you found out that you were spending $32,000 out of $400,000, or if you found out that you were spending $48,000 out of $600,000, or if you're spending $64,000 out of $800,000, whatever the math is, if it ends up being an expense to gross ratio of 0.08 or 8%, and you find out that most practices are 7.5% to 8.5%, well, you could feel pretty good, right? Wrong, because you haven't counted the costs. See, that's what the average dentist does who has no idea how much supplies cost. And if they have no idea how much supplies cost, when the sales reps sell them stuff, you will pay 8%. But in my practice, we spent 3.37% last year. There's a big difference between 3.37% and 8%. And I'm not talking that the difference is 4.63%. I'm talking that the difference is $50,000. So if you want to save $50,000, here's one thing you got to learn. Learn how to count the costs. Learn how to count the cost of supplies and learn how to shop for supplies. And that's what we're going to talk about next.